Hello everyone, it is time for another live stream. Today I'm going to sit because I'm exhausted. So I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. Just want to get my notes here on the screen in front of me. Hopefully get everything correct. It was funny, I had everything set up. I mean, I've been actually sitting in front of this computer for some time getting prepared, and then right as I'm about to click the start stream, the white balance changed and I looked blue. I was thinking, why? Why now? Hi, Mr. Reef Buster. Hello, Synthetic Reef. Hi, James. Elmer, Lynn, Jamie, Martin, Jared, Elmer, Carlos, Yvonne. I could do this all day. Hi, guys. I'm so glad that you tuned in. So, all right. This has been a really hard week. And it started last weekend, and I couldn't talk about it. And so now I'm going to give you little information, but not all of it. Last weekend, right, I'm in the middle of, running a business. I got a phone call saying that such and such is about to happen. And I thought, now? And so I had to really work hard to get as much done as I could get done before I had to get on the road and head across the country. And I did. I worked like crazy over the weekend, last weekend. I did the stream, and then I started working, gluing things, because anything I could glue on Saturday, I could ship on Monday. Anything I could glue on Sunday, I could ship on Tuesday. And Tuesday, I had to leave. So it was quite a hectic ordeal trying to get what I could get accomplished for you guys when you place your orders on Me Loves Reef. And I appreciate those orders, by the way. And then I had to get in my car and start driving. And it was a very long drive. I basically was behind the wheel about 18, 19 hours one direction. Got there just in time to actually participate in what I had to do. Literally, I was there like 3 minutes before such and such was going to happen. And I did my part, and it went really, really well. And I was very excited about that because it's been in the works for a long time. We have been waiting for this stage in my project to get accomplished. And it's been frustrating waiting. It's been frustrating hearing the excuses. It's just been a beating. And even the... I'm not going to say that. So we got what we could get done, and then I basically, within a matter of hours, was like, I'm exhausted, I have to sleep. And I just said goodnight, and I went to my room, and I slept for about 12 hours. And when I woke up, it was, I looked at my texts, and an hour and a half before, I got a text saying, we're ready for you. I thought, great, let me take a shower and start my day, and I grabbed a bottle of water and a protein bar, and I ran back over to the project and got involved with what I had to do next. So I worked all day, and everything worked perfectly, and I was so relieved. But I then had to have a lot of conversations with said person, and I worked with them for some time discussing logistics and what was going to happen next and what we've accomplished and what has been achieved and what we need to deal with right now, and what we have to deal with tomorrow, which was yesterday. And then I ran out of steam again. I said, I need to take a nap. And I took that nap for a couple of hours. I had dinner, and at dinner, I was told something that I did not think was ever going to happen. So here is your surprise teaser, because it's not news yet. It's just a teaser. But he told me that I get to share with you on YouTube what I've been working on for the past 2 years. And I'm so excited. I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? So here's the thing. I've been very vague. I haven't said much detail. That's because I want something in writing saying that I can talk about this. And once I have a signed affidavit, then I will go ahead and I'll bring you guys up to speed. And, it's a work in progress. It's still months from completion. But I have a lot of footage that I've been sitting on, and a lot of pictures, and I would love to get into a full-on discussion about what I've been working on. And so when people think, man, Mark just tells you everything and he can't keep a secret, I have been sitting on this secret for a long time, and I'm really relieved. I can tell you the one thing that we accomplished was super important. I dreamt it up a long time ago. I said I need this to happen, and people got involved and started working on logistics to see how that could be accomplished. They did computer simulations. They did all this stuff. And then they tested it. It didn't work. It broke. So they had to go back to the drawing board and redesign a different way. And so that will be coming in the coming, I don't know, the next month or so, you'll start to see things coming out that have up till now been locked down with an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. So I am really happy about that. And then, of course, I had 19 hours of driving back home. And I got home late last night. So obviously, while I was gone for the last few days, nothing has shipped to customers. I shipped out everything I could on Tuesday before I left town. And I literally worked all day and then got behind the wheel. And so it was really exhausting. So I'm kind of shot for the weekend. I am wiped out. I don't even know how I'm going to do anything else for the next day and a half. But I'm going to see what I can, little things. And then starting Monday, I get a pallet of RODI parts because I know some of you have ordered RODI systems. And I will start building those units and getting them on their way. It's nice to get another supply of parts. When I order $6,000 worth, which may not seem like much to you, but it's a lot of RODI systems that I assemble and then I ship out to customers across the nation. So that was why I've been AWOL for the last few days. You haven't seen me much on social media. I have been keeping things quiet. But I came home and I got something that I didn't expect to get. So I got one of these. It is a stimulus check from the government for money. And I know how I was telling you guys, don't waste your money. And so I'm curious what you think I'm going to use this for. Feel free in the comments to tell me what you think I would do with stimulus money that is supposed to help me in these times of crisis. So that was kind of cool. I was like, whoa, I didn't think I'd get one of those. And so I did. I got one. I was like, oh, who knew? That was kind of nice. Now, the Reef update, the tank behind me, and it looks very blue. I messed with the lights today. I was trying to find something that would look decent, and it still never looks decent. So maybe we should just do one of these things instead, and then we will get into our topic, but I want to give you a quick update. So let me just do this, and I'll throw myself over here. Someone's asking, was I a stripper? Yes, I was for a long time. So, the Reef update. And so you're looking, this footage was actually shot a week ago after the big thing. And I'll move my circle over here so you can see the other side. Nothing, I'm trying to hide something, cover it up with my face. The Reef is doing really well. The corals that were in distress are, that were completely removed are removed. The corals that survived have survived quite well. The Shadowcaster still has some area of malcontent, but I think really it's the fish are snacking on the weakened tissue of a certain area that will already look bad. And I just haven't had the energy or time to pull out the entire colony and chop off a giant piece of death and just put back in the good part. So that is coming. And maybe that'll happen this weekend. I also would like to do a water change on the system, and during the water change, siphon the sand bed. But I feel like I want a second person here to keep track of the end of the hose, so I don't have a disaster while I'm focused on what I'm doing in the tank. So that is something coming up. I do want to mention something over here. In the upper left part of your screen above the green acro, those are it's an acropora colony. I probably got it from Dwayne. There's a couple up there. And one has been brown for a long time and just looks like nothing. It's kind of hideous. And I've been just thinking I should rip it out. And the tips are all bursting with growth and color while the colony is brown. So I thought, well, that was kind of a cool result after this big RTN event. Obviously the giant water changes, the running carbon, doing all this proactive stuff apparently helped to course correct some issues and at the same time show some improvement in a couple of corals where new growth is actually nice and colorful. And I'll try to get some close-up macros of those tips to share with you guys. I think that'd be really neat. So that is it. And then the other weird thing that's happening in my tank right now is some brown stuff on the sand bed. You know that brown stuff you guys complain about? I finally got some of it. It's just a little bit. It definitely acts like it's photosynthetic, not like cyano, by the way, but like cyano. Not sure what it is. I've seen it in the past. I'm sure it has something to do with everything that happened in my tank. There was the RTN event. There was very likely a coral spawning event. There was chemical warfare, and then there was the giant makeover of me attacking the tank and trying to salvage everything I could so that nothing bad would happen. And as you can see, there's a lot of healthy corals in the tank, all from end to end. It's just the middle part near the top that got the biggest hit, and that's where I attacked it before it could spread. And I did. I stopped it. So that is where we are on that. And let me now get into our topic for today. Should I put myself right here in the middle? Today's topic is about heat. And, this is August is typically the hottest month of the year, and for us here in the U.S. I mean, I realize I'm talking to an international audience, and people on the other side of the world are like, this is our winter, but, let's just pretend we're all on the same page at the same time, on the same calendar. And so with it being so hot, we need to prepare our aquariums for protection from said heat because it could, cook your reef. And there are certain ways that your tank can overheat this time of year. It could be heaters that you own have failed. And some people will actually proactively unplug their heaters this time of year to make sure they don't turn on, which I don't know if that's a good idea. I kind of don't recommend it because at night your tanks tend to cool off, and if your tank cools off too much, it's a big temperature swing. Said, for example, let's say you like to keep the house nice and cool at night so you can sleep, and your tank creeps down to 76 degrees, but then the tank goes all the way up to 83, 84 degrees. That's an 8-degree swing. That's enough to cause corals to start to spiral and go out of control and possibly even die. So we want to keep, something, I mean, people like to have very tight margins on their temperature control of their aquarium, somewhere around 1 degree per day. And myself, my tank tends to be about 2.5 degree swing from day to night. And that's been like that forever, and my corals are acclimated to it. They're used to it. But if there was a sudden 3, 4, 5 degree change of temperature in my tank, I'm sure my corals would react adversely. So that's why I keep my temperature in my house always the same. And I have heaters that come on at night to keep the temperature up enough to where it's close. In other words, you can actually raise your heater temperature slightly to bring it up closer to the daytime temperature so it can't dip down quite as much. Or you might want to go the other extreme and you try to bring it down cooler so that way when the heat happens, it doesn't have as high to go. See what I'm saying? You're trying to find that sweet spot that works best for your environment. Now, what else can happen besides heaters failing? Your AC can fail. And that happens to a lot of people. The hottest time of the year, your AC unit just suddenly gives up its ghost. It's wiped out. You're calling a repairman. He says, we're swamped. It's going to be 2-3 days, or it could even be, we'll be there tomorrow. And you're thinking, what about right now? So that in those scenarios, what can you possibly do? Well, that's why I'm telling you now, so you can prepare a little bit. Now, in my big tank, it's impossible for me to do what I'm telling you, but for most of you, you have smaller tanks. I mean, people will say, hey, I have a problem with green hair algae, and, so I just automatically in my brain think, oh, they must have a 120-gallon tank or something big, and then they say, I have a 13-gallon fluval, or I have a 21-gallon this. And I'm just thinking, oh, it's so small. You can just work on it. You can solve it. You can fix this today. But with these smaller tanks, one of your simplest solutions when the room is too warm and the tank is warming up, or even if the room is right but the tank is warming up, you can take and float a frozen bottle of water in your aquarium. So if you have 20-ounce, you have a small nano tank, you can freeze 20-ounce bottles of water. Put 3, 4 of those in your freezer, and just put one in the tank each day during the warmest part of the day, and that'll keep the tank from getting any warmer. And as the bottle melts, you can just remove the bottle and put another frozen one in. And you can just rotate those through your freezer. And basically you want to keep some ready to go at any time. Now for those with bigger tanks, your smart move would be to put frozen 2-liter bottles of water in your freezer. And that also benefits your freezer, because having that huge block of ice in there makes the freezer on your refrigerator not cycle on and off as frequently, because it's kind of keeping it cold because there's a frozen brick in there. So that's kind of a side bit perk, I could say. But you want to go ahead and freeze some bottles right now, today, because once this heat wave happens and your tank is in distress, you can't wait for the water to freeze. Now, if you're in a hurry and you have no other choice, you can always get bags of frozen ice from a local convenience store. I would definitely recommend wiping it down first before you put it in your tank, possibly even putting inside another bag, and then tying that off really well, and put that in the tank or in the sump to cool the water that way. And it'll be a slow melting situation, and as the bag turns to slush and then eventually turns to water, ideally you don't want any of that water to leak out of the bag and pour into your sump. So you're going to have to that's why I was suggesting put it inside another bag. So hopefully you can leverage that sack of water out of your sump and not let any of that cold ice from wherever it came, made of whatever we don't know, and not take a chance with your tank. Another thing that obviously would be ideal would be a chiller, and maybe and some of you probably have chillers already hooked up, and so the question is, have you done the maintenance on your chiller? I'll move this up slightly so it looks more logical. All right, so I would say you want to make sure your chiller is clean. You want to make sure that the intake screen has not been clogged up. It may be time for some kind of maintenance on it. Definitely open up the case and start looking inside and see how it's doing. Make sure that that chiller has got really good ventilation around it. It's not sitting in a cabinet of heat where it's fighting its own, thermodynamics. Because as the chiller pumps out heat out the back to cool the water that's running through it, the cabinet itself gets warmer and warmer if it's like hiding under your aquarium, and it makes it harder for the chiller to compete with that heat. It can't get rid of it. That's why chillers need to usually be external to the tank stand. They need to be adjacent, or the cabinet has to have holes in the back or in the front to let ventilation get through, to allow it to operate in more, not opportunistic, optimal conditions. So we want to make sure that our chiller's in good shape. If you're using cooling fans, make sure those fans are turning on. If you want, again, being proactive, you can take the fans that are set up with your programming and have them actually programmed to come on even earlier in the day to kind of compete the heat that's coming. So in other words, if your fan normally turned on at 1 in the afternoon, maybe it'd be better to have it come on at 10:30 and have it already start to cool down the water just a little bit. And that way, as the heat of the day happens, it doesn't quite get to that point. And then, your fans may normally turn off at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, maybe 9 o'clock at night, and you might need to run them all the way till 1 in the morning. Now, using the Apex controller, if that's what you have, you can program it to where the fans come on and off at certain temperatures, based on the water temperature. When the tank is 77 degrees, the fans turn off. When the tank is 79.5, the fans turn on, that kind of scenario. But you could change those margins and make it where it comes on a little bit sooner and turns off a little bit later. Or you can actually do it with time. You can say, if time is this, on, if time is that, off, so you can program accordingly. But we want to, these are just a few of the scenarios of keeping the tank cool. Another one would be that your AC goes out, but you still have power. And so your tank is okay, it's got flow and everything's working well, but the house is getting warmer and warmer. Might be worth considering owning or purchasing or renting, at the very least, a portable AC unit. And that way you could hook that up and you could have it pumping cold air in the same room as the aquarium and venting the hot air that's coming out of the back of that portable AC unit out a window or out a doorway or through a really long, like the vent hoses on dryers, and send that snake off toward the garage or something. I don't know. I mean, it won't be convenient, but it'll, in emergency situations, we have to do some weird things to make sure that our babies behind us, behind me, are nice and healthy and safe. And so my fish room actually has the ducting in the wall, because I used to have a portable AC unit in there. And then eventually I discovered I didn't need it, but I didn't change the ducting. And I still have the unit. So if I had to pump cold air into the room behind me, I could go ahead and just set up the machine right back in front of that spot, run the tube right into the wall, and it goes right up the vent, and it goes into my attic, and it goes out through the roof. So I have the ability to run, and I have, on occasion, put it in there temporarily to help give the tank a reprieve from the heat while things were going on. I can't remember when I did it last, but I have done it. I remember that I've done it a couple of times specifically. It's like, okay, no cooling of the workshop. We're going to take that. We're going to put it by the aquarium. And I did it for a couple of days, and then things were back to normal, and I put it back in the workshop. So a portable AC, those are usually more expensive than a window unit. If your aquarium is in a bedroom with windows, you can just get a regular window unit and plug that in. Now, a very important thing you need to know about window units is they have a certain fixed length of the power cord, and you can't just grab any old average extension cord and run it all the way to wherever that outlet is. It has to be something that can handle the amperage of that window unit. So, do your research. Don't just say, well, I guess this will work. Don't ever say, I guess. It's best to know what you bought and then find a matching cord, or ask the guy when you're buying it. Hopefully they have enough knowledge to say, yeah, you definitely need such and such extension cord to handle what you're doing. Because, matter of fact, my little tiny portable AC unit said on huge tags, warning, do not use an extension cord on this unit. And the cord was so short. How would you not use an extension cord? And obviously there's nothing I can do about that. But the point is, that was their warning. I don't know if they were just trying to cover themselves from a lawsuit, but that thing was ridiculously short and can't possibly reach any kind of an outlet within a normal distance of how they would normally be used, and so that was kind of annoying. That is pretty much it when it comes to talking about heat. I don't have this giant topic like I told you. It's been a very tiring week, and I was just thinking, I just want to come on here and answer questions. So, but I like to have some kind of a topic for the stream. And so now I'm going to jump right into your questions. So if you have been asking questions with @MeLovesReef, that will help me find them. If you haven't, please start doing that now. And I will start scrolling back up to the top and find what you guys talked about last. Let me go ahead and pull myself off the screen here temporarily. I'll try and figure out if I can come back. How about now? Do we have some sound now? Maybe I should rewind and start the stream all over again from the beginning. The reason that I don't know when you guys tell me something is I'm always 20 minutes behind the stream. So I don't know when it went out, and I apologize for that. Andrea called me up. I thought, that's weird, she's calling me during the stream. So let me know if you can hear me now. I'm just waiting to see if you guys got any audio yet. Yep. So I have no idea what happened. Literally no idea. But I fixed it. Thanks, guys. Okay, I got it. All right, we have sound. That's good. I apologize. I have no idea where I left off. I mean, she told me she knows where I left off, but I don't know where that was. I've spoken since then. Somebody tell me what question I left off at, and I'll scroll back up and get to it. And that way we can get back on track. We wasted valuable insight. All right, so tell me what I need to go back to question-wise. If anyone remembers, or we'll just start from scratch all over again. Jamie says, guess who's back? Back again. Mark is back. Tell your friends. I sense a little Eminem in there. All right. It would be great if I had someone watching the live chat and could tell me instantly when things happen. Amanda says, all I do with my life in quarantine is watch you. I'm getting fat. Figurehead supports Spock's fatness too. Thanks for the super chat. You're sweet. Appreciate that. All right, so I need you guys to tell me where I left off in the questions because I don't know. So he says, just go back to the beginning. God, how long was I quiet? It's terrible. Odile, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Let me see. All right, I don't know. I don't know where I left off. I don't want to talk about stuff you've already heard. That would be terrible too. She said it's where I said I'll be right back. What did I say? This is the most unproductive live stream ever at this very moment. I just got here, start all over. Did I talk about heat? Did I talk about cooling? Did anyone hear any of that? Did I just lose it during the Q&A? I need an update. I need to call Andrea. I got a voicemail from my friend in New Jersey too. Everyone's telling me, your sound doesn't work. Let's try this. Ah, okay. No, no, I was just trying to figure out where we lost it. So we lost it during the Q&A. So everything before that we heard, right? Yes, I'm still here. I didn't hear any of that. Well, everyone's waiting for you, so it's all good. Okay, all right, Q&A, got it. Thank you very much. Bye. Yeah, it's laggy. Okay, bye. All right, all right, all right, all right. So apparently we are going to jump to the Q&A portion of this live stream. I apologize for the at least 10, if not 15-minute silent movie section of this stream. Didn't know. And I will answer all of your questions right now. I'm going to answer them faster than before because we got to catch up. Vivek asked specifically, what do you suggest for a 350-gallon aquarium? How long should the chiller take to drop the temperature from 30 degrees Celsius to 26 Celsius running a chiller? It almost takes 4 to 5 hours. I'm planning to upgrade. I was saying that I would think you need to contact the manufacturer for them to do the math, to compute your total gallons, your ambient room temperature, and then the size of that chiller you own, the horsepower, and determine if it is the right size rated for your tank. It may be completely normal that it's supposed to run 4 to 5 hours, or it may need to just run for an hour at a time, occasionally as needed. So talking to them would help you scale up to the correct size chiller to match your aquarium's needs. Delonzo said, when I'm using Copper Safe to treat my clownfish, I believe it had ick or Brucnella. It's been about a month ago, so should I continue to treat? My answer is to talk to Humble Fish on Facebook because he is the fish disease expert as far as I'm concerned. And I believe his website is humble.fish. And Amanda, I wanted to say again, thank you for coming to your first live stream. I'm glad you're here as well. Then there was several, I put these on the screen. We were talking about what was I going to do with the stimulus check, and Lynn said give it away. Benjamin says it's $1,200 worth of Spock food. Luke spent his on corals. Marcus suggested I spend the money on acrylic to catch up on orders. And then 508 Fisher said that he paid off his bills with his, which is great. That's kind of the purpose of the stimulus, was to help pay your rent. And just kind of deal with the regular stuff, which is kind of where my brain is on this. I'm not thinking, oh, I want to spoil myself with a new toy. Even though toys are nice, we just don't know what's going on. Eric asked me, did the water changes take care of your high nitrates as well? And they definitely did. I was around 80 or so, and as of last week, I haven't measured yet, as of last week they were 80. I'm sorry, they were 80, and as of last week they were 30. So that's really good progress. John Smith asked about using black light for prolonged use in an aquarium, and I just don't know the answer. So I'm hoping one of you guys knows if that's a factor that you have to be worried about, or if it just doesn't even matter. I think black light is really considered UV lighting, correct? And normally we like to use blue lighting in the 460 nanometers range, which is not like a black light. It's just a different spectrum. And I think that you should use that light for lighting paintings on the wall rather than in your aquarium. But I don't know the answer. So there's my answer, is that I don't know my answer. And then I had this huge topic that I went into that none of you heard. So let me address it again. Jamie says, lots of people talk about overlighting the corals being bad, but what are the long-term effects of underlighting? Is it just brown corals, or will it actually kill the corals? So the overlighting, what I wanted to emphasize was that if you run your lights too long, and I think many of you do, I think many of you like to run lights for about 12 hours a day, maybe even longer, and I just don't believe that's the right approach. I think 7 to 9 hours of light per day is plenty for the aquarium. And if you need it to run late into the evening, then I would just start them later in the day. My metal halides come on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're off by 9:30, and that's even with a staggered lighting schedule. The light you're looking at right now on the screen that's over the Gorgonian and the hammer coral, that light comes on at 1 o'clock, and it's off at 7. It's running for 6 hours, and that's it. The next light comes on at 2:15, it's off at 8:30, and the last one comes on at 3:30 and it's off at 9:30. So basically I'm running roughly about 6 hours per light, but I stagger it to stretch out the day, and it kind of gives you that look of the sun moving across the reef. So that is my recommendation is don't run the lights quite as long as maybe what's programmed in the fixture when you buy it. There's still the ability to add supplemental lighting earlier in the day and run it later into the night. And that's not growing your corals. That's more like mood lighting for you to enjoy your tank during the morning hours. But again, I wouldn't start at 8 a.m. I'd probably start at, well, I do. I start mine at 11:30, like a normal person. I know I'm a little bit crazy. And and that supplemental lighting on my tank starts at 11:30 in the morning, and by 11 o'clock at night, it's switched to moon lighting for 30, moon lighting, not mood, moon lighting for 30 minutes, and then it's dark. Now, Jamie asked, what about underlighting? What are the effects on corals? Well, let's say, for example, someone bought a light fixture from Marineland, from Petco, that had the word Reef on the package, and they thought it's good enough. It might be good enough for a shallow tank that's 12 inches tall that's filled with zoanthids. But if you said, well, I really like chalices, I want to get these high-end SPS corals, I want to have clams, that Reef quote-unquote light may not be good enough for that tank. And it would be underlighting the corals, and they just wouldn't do well. They'd struggle. And the other thing is, if you have too much light, the corals can start to exude zooxanthellae from their mouths, from their polyps. And what it's doing is it's expelling it for whatever reason, whether there's too much in its system or because it is bleaching out and going to eventually turn white, which even happens in our oceans. So we want to make sure that we're not blasting our corals with too much light, and we don't want to weaken them by not providing them nearly enough as well. So if we had a super weak light, does that mean you could run it for 20 hours a day to give the coral enough? No, that doesn't work either. We need the right strength of light. And the best way to know the strength of the light hitting your tank is with a par meter. And that way you can actually physically measure the par in your aquarium and see what the intensity is. Now, in this exact spot of the aquarium you're looking at on your screen, we have Duncans in the lower left corner, we have Acans in the lower right corner, and that is probably the darkest corner of my tank. The par down in that area basically measures about 80, which is really quite low. But those corals seem thick and healthy. The Acans fluff up every single day and then shrink down every night. Would they do even better in a different spot? I guarantee you they would. But it was a spot that I chose to put them in, and it seems to be working out okay. Would I put something high-end in there like a Walt Disney Acro? Absolutely not. I would put it up high somewhere near the Shadowcaster behind Acrogonian, where it can get plenty of light so it can really thrive. You can order a par meter online and buy it, or you can get a par sensor that connects to your Apex for a few $100s, or you could even rent a par meter from BRS for about a week. There's a fee or a deposit or something, and then you can actually measure the light in your tank and know what's what, instead of just guessing and hoping and saying, well, the corals look okay, so I'm probably all right. This would be the way I would approach this situation, is just to look at the actual numbers rather than guessing and hoping for the best. Myself, I like to own a par meter. My local club also has a par meter that club members can borrow, and the only problem is that everyone's so far apart in our area that getting it returned in a timely fashion has always been a problem, and so the wait list just seems to be indefinite. It just seems to be so slow getting to the next person, and that's unfortunate. So it's another reason why I just like to own my own stuff, where I can just reach on the shelf, get it, use it, measure, put it away, know it's safe and sound and dry and not dropped or damaged or in any form or fashion broken. And I'm at the point now where I need to buy a par meter anyway, because mine is at least 10 years old and I want to replace it with a new one, and I just haven't pulled the trigger. Let's see. Ben had asked me before about okay, so he said, you removed the sea bay anemone from your bubble tip anemone tank due to the chemical warfare. Could you explain how there's no chemical warfare now, since both tanks are still connected to the sump? That's a great question, and I don't really have a scientific answer why it worked out. I just have some guesses. So when the sea bay anemone was initially put into my bubble tip anemone tank, I was told it was a weird looking bubble tip. I agreed. I put it in there. And it seemed okay initially, and then I just started to watch it shrink and shrink and shrink. It basically appeared to be withering away. It wasn't touched by bubble tip anemones. It It was down on the sand in a spot of the tank that had a lot of light. I mean, not tons, but it was a bright spot in the aquarium, and it just wasn't doing well. And I thought, well, if I leave it there, it's going to turn to goo. It's just going to die, and it's going to add problems to the water. So let me pull it out, and I'll put it inside my 400-gallon tank. And I put it in that lower right corner where the A cans are now, because I thought that'd be a great spot for a sea bay. Because at that point, I realized what I had was definitely not a bubble tip. But I also wondered, would there be a problem with the sea bay still being in the same body of water? Well, basically, my assumption is, just like in the ocean, anemones exist in different parts of the reef, and they do have distance between them. And yes, there's a giant body of water between them, when you consider dilution. But I think in this situation, or this scenario, the proximity was what was really hurting it the most. And I am assuming that they basically can't smell it in the water column. Like, just because it exists in another tank nearby that shares the same filtration and the same sump, I don't think they are aware of its presence, its existence, which is pretty impressive considering that the sea bay grew to be about 24 inches in diameter. So it's got to have some kind of an impact on the entire system of water. But the bubble tips seem to be doing very well in their tank. The sea bay seems to be doing very well in the 400-gallon. And I haven't seen anything that would make me think there was some kind of a conflict. So yeah, I don't have a scientific answer. A lot of you guys are talking about losing power recently. Eric says, do you make fan trays for people to use in their sumps? I do. They have to be measured to fit your sump. So I need to know the inner width front to back of the sump as well as the outer width of the sump. And what I do with that information is I make these brackets that have notches on the front and back where it nestles down into the rim of the sump, so it could technically slide left to right, but it can't slide front to back. So in that regard, it should stay in place relatively well, and even if you were to kind of bump it with your elbow, it'd probably stay there. But if you really did something nutty, like you're yanking out a reactor and you just topple the thing, it could fall in. But it's designed to sit on top, and even if the sump were to overfill and fill to the brim with water due to some error on your part, the fans would be above the water level just a little bit, but enough they wouldn't short out. But if the water's that high in your sump, you already have bigger problems to contend with than what's happening to your fan tray. But yeah, I build fan trays for customers. And they fit 80 millimeter, which is a 3-inch fan, and 120 millimeter, which is the 4-inch fan. But if you already own the fans and you're like, I need a fan tray bracket, I can do it, but you need to physically measure them. Because typically a 4-inch fan is the fan blade, and the actual fan itself, wall to wall, is more like 4 3/4 across. And a 3-inch fan is more like 3 1/8. So I need, if you have your own fans, you're not going to buy fans from my website, then I would need to know this. The fans I sell are the Ice Cap Smart fans. They use a USB wire connection that goes into a little I don't know, USB plug, sort of like the ones we use for so many of our devices, but it's kind of oval rather than the little square nugget we're so used to. And then Vivek asked, what's the sweet temperature for anemones? I have a dedicated anemone tank for harvesting, so what temperature would make it productive? I don't know, because I don't grow anemones to propagate and sell. If anything, I try to keep things stable so they don't split. But you might need to do some research and talk to some people that do propagate anemones to see what they're doing. Normally, one of the techniques is to feed them well and do a big water change. And also sometimes a water change with different temperature water than your reef could also trigger a split. But then again, what about the rest of the livestock in that tank? The fish, how are they going to handle a big temperature swing? So you have to think, what's the best ideal scenario? Now I keep looking at the microphone thing constantly because you guys told me I was dead for so long. I don't know what happened. Make says, I hope that's pronounced correctly, said, I started my biodenitrator. My nitrates are down to 2 ppm from 50 ppm. So it's working, but my phosphates are increasing weekly by 0.15 to 0.20. Should I use Phosphate RX weekly? It's a 300-gallon tank. You could use it weekly if you felt the urge. I don't watch my phosphates nearly as closely as that. I mean, I test them every week, but I don't try to maintain some magical number. So my phosphates, a month ago, before the whole thing happened in my tank, were measuring 0.05, and I was very happy with that number. It was great to see a nice low number. But I've also seen phosphates in my tank to be as much as 0.75. And when it was that high is when I treated my tank. I should have treated it a little sooner. But typically, I treat the tank about once every 10 weeks, and that is to remove the phosphate from the water, knock it way down, and then I just let it gradually rise upward again. I don't choose to make it stay a certain point all the time, and that's worked for me for a decade. So I don't worry that if the phosphates are higher, I'm suddenly going to see algae in my tank. I don't. My tanks just don't have algae in them. I'm sure there's a little bit here and there, but there's nothing like, oh, my tank is covered in green hair algae, or oh, my tank's covered with bubble algae. That's just not what happens. There'll just be some little thing here or there that you might look if you start studying very closely, which you're welcome to do at some point. And then Thomas pointed out correctly that there are chillers that are outdoors that don't affect the temperature of the house, and that is 100% true. The split chillers are more expensive, but yeah, that's awesome because not only is the big part outside where it's releasing heat, the sound of it is outside. And then you just have this coil that is near your tank or in your sump or near your sump that is chilling the water. And that's a great system. And if you could do that, that also is beneficial. That's beneficial on so many levels. Number one, less space in the house is being used up. You don't pump heat into the house where the AC has to fight the heat away. You don't have the sound. I mean, these are all great reasons, but they are more expensive than a standard chiller that you just plug in right next to your tank. Alex says, when I successfully spawn an orange-spotted filefish captive bred, would you want a pair? I think I might. That would be awesome. They're so pretty. I've never kept any. And STE, I feel like we're missing some letters, unless he's a saint, said, I kept a clam in my 7-gallon tank for 2 years and it did very well. The squamosa works best as they're quite hardy and don't need as much light as other species. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's great. And then there's a whole bunch of comments about there's no sound. Smoke and Reefer says, what is the pink coral you have at the top of the tank? I've never seen that one previously in a reef. It looks amazing. Is it a chalice? Actually, what that coral is in the back of it was in the back of my tank, was a type of Montipora that was growing behind the Shadowcaster and Drew's Acro and the really pretty chalice you guys love. And when I was rearranging and doing things, I just put it on the empty spot because it needed to go somewhere. And it's actually a nice change of pace because when you look at the tank now, and if I jump in this video to a different spot, you can see right there again, it's changing the color dynamic of the tank. So you got some purple on the left, and you've got that, let's call it honey brown in the front of the Pavona, the Cactus Pavona. You got the Shadowcaster, and then you've got that Monty, and then there's the chalice down below. So I kind of like it. Elmer says, what fish and corals are the most temperature sensitive? I don't know. I bet Google knows that answer. I don't know. I've never heard of a certain one. I mean, okay. There are certain corals that do better in colder water. There's certain fish that do better in colder water. So taking a cold water fish, like a peppermint angelfish that costs $10,000, you're not going to put that inside your 79-degree tank because it will die and you'll be out $10,000. So, and I know that seahorses, or at least some seahorses, like colder water, like 72 degrees. So putting them in a 78, 79-degree tank will shorten their lifespan. So in that situation, we want to know where the fish normally comes from. You know, what is its normal water column temperature, and then decide if we want to put it in our aquarium. And now I need to scroll past so many things about how you couldn't hear me. Charles says, if I run a UV and an ozone, will it inhibit any kind of beneficial microorganisms? Yeah, anything that crosses over the UV bulb will die, good or bad. So you're killing bad bacteria, yes, but you're killing good bacteria. If any pods were to go through that thing, they would die as well. Ozone, I don't think so much. I don't think it'll quite affect the microfauna in your tank. Insane Reefer says, what are your thoughts on dosing Predivia before water change versus after the water change? I would do it after the water change because why would I want to pump out water with something I just added? And that's with any product. You know, if I'm going to put in magnesium or I'm going to put in alkalinity or I'm going to put in potassium or iron, I would put it in the water that's going to stay in the tank, not water I'm sucking out of the system. Jamie says, I had to answer the door for the Uber Eats delivery, and that's why we have no sound. Actually, I'm enjoying all your comments. Someone said I was abducted. Same person. This is all Devin. He's messing with me. Did he leave us? Come back. Mark broke or he fell asleep. Oh, yeah, Michael, thank you for addressing that. I can't even remember when we talked about this. I think I talked about it in the first part before we lost our sound. We just want to make sure that the wiring on the extension cord can match the AC unit. That's really important. Alex says, do the return pumps generate heat? My aquarium is 80 degrees, my room is 74. Yes, the return pump can generate heat, such as a mag pump. Those are very hot running pumps. And also, okay, let's talk about the mag pump for a minute. The mag pump puts out a lot of heat, and it also, well, the reason it does that is if the plumbing is too restrictive. So for example, a Mag 5 has half-inch threads, so people screw half-inch pipe on it, which is the wrong way to install that pump. Because now that it has to squeeze water through such a narrow pipe, the pump runs much hotter and actually uses more electricity than if you were to screw 1-inch pipe onto that Mag 5. You're supposed to double the thread size of any mag pump with the plumbing that goes back up to the tank. So if you have a mag pump with 3/4-inch threads, you should have 1.5-inch plumbing going up. And this is actually in the instructions of the pump, but a lot of people don't know that or don't read the instructions on that regard. And that's a problem. So if you had the right size plumbing connected to that pump, it's going to run cooler, it's going to use less electricity, which you can measure with a kilowatt. You'll actually see the difference in energy consumption because it's not fighting so hard to push water through such a narrow pipe. And so in your scenario, that could be the problem. Now, there are other pumps out there that don't generate a lot of heat. But cumulatively, all the pumps in our system all add a little bit. And then our lights add a little bit as well. So we want to find out what's the source of the heat, what's causing it, and see if we can reduce it. I'm laughing because Derek says, I can hear Mark in my head. This is scary. I see Mark's tank, but there's no Mark. Oh, boy. This is a social experiment to see how long we will stay here. Odile says, where is Mark? Like, where is Waldo? You guys don't see me on the screen right now because my face is so red because I'm so embarrassed I lost the sound for so long. Patriot Soul says, I have issues with cyano and my nitrates, and my phosphate are all 0. Does anyone else have this issue? The tank is only 3 years, or the tank is 3 years old. Yes, having everything at 0 will lead to problems, including cyanobacteria. You absolutely must have some nitrate and you must have some phosphate in the water. Nitrites should be 0. That part is correct. Insane Reefer says that I teleported to a different dimension. B. Speak says it's an emergency bathroom break. Thank God that Andrea was working on it and called me. I thought, how strange, she's calling me during the stream, and normally I would have ignored that. But I thought, well, she's calling me. She's a moderator. Maybe she's going to tell me something I need to know. Mr. Reef Buster says the aliens have Mark. Oh, my goodness. My cheeks are so red right now. Eric says, I think he fell asleep. I did tell you I was tired. Macy says, I will stay if it, or Macy's daddy says, which I think his name is Rick, said, I will stay if it takes 1,000 years. Jamie said, Spock finally did it. He Kelly Rippa'd his co-host. PPS says, I'd like to order some custom acrylics. Do you ship to Sweden? I can ship things to Sweden. I need to know what exactly you want so I can get the weight, the measurement, the dollar amount to get you a shipping quote. I would also need to know your postal code. Let's see. Derek says, stay away from the light. More of the aliens. Elmer, did you make the coffee? He said, I'm going to go make some more coffee. Let's see. I'm trying to find it. Hang on, guys. Let's see. All right, there we go. I'm finally down to the part where everyone says they can hear me. Thank God. Well, that was terrible. Now I hear Eminem in my head. It's so funny. Charles says, you're about to answer my question. Okay. Nick Fab says, what would you say are the critical temperature levels for acros when they are annoyed, distressed, or even dead? I'd say 85 is the beginning of the end. And if your tank accidentally were to get up to 90, you can pretty much kiss off all the SPS in your reef. Usually in those scenarios, everything is just dying, decaying. Tissue is sloughing off. It's landing on other stuff. It's smothering other things. The oxygen level is already falling like a rock. And the fish in the tank are suffering because of the excess temperature. So it's really, really important that we don't let our tanks get above 85. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when we have an average temperature day to day, week to week, month to month, let's say your tank is always 79 to 81. If it creeps up to 83 or 84, your tank is kind of used to it. If your tank tends to be 75 to 77 and it goes up to 84, that's a whole other situation where things are going to fall apart quickly. So even though you haven't lost the oxygen level, you still are at risk because it's an 8-degree higher than normal scenario. And you know, they're talking about the corals and the reefs and the oceans are dying because the water went up 1 degree Celsius. I keep thinking 1 degree, what is that? Why is that such an issue? But then again, when our average body temperature as a human is 98.6. And when we are 99 or we're 100 degrees, I mean, we're talking about a very small amount. We call it a low-grade fever. And the same thing's happening in our ocean. So we definitely want to find something that's close to the average in our tank at all times and avoid it getting any higher. Dean says, I want to get a small clam, but I have a jade wrasse. Do you think that'll be a problem? I don't know. I don't even know what a jade wrasse is. I'd have to look one up after the stream. Jamie says, are you not running an Apex on that microphone to ping you with a notification if your microphone isn't working? I'm sure there's an Apex group on Facebook that could help you with that. Yeah, let me move the sound thing down here so it's close to y'all's chat. Now I'm super paranoid. It's hilarious and embarrassing. Oh my God. I don't know when's the last time we had a problem with sound on the live stream. That's just bonkers. Let's see. My name is Nobody says, is there only about 9 hours of sun on the ocean every day? You have to think about the angle of how the light is hitting the ocean. What I'm talking about is useful light for the reef. I know we try to mimic the ocean, but also we can't mimic the entire ocean. We are mimicking parts of the ocean. There are parts of the ocean where it gets an immense amount of light, and there's parts where they don't get nearly as much. Then we have parts where the corals are down low. Now think about this. A lot of times people also forget the corals are down a little deeper in the water, 30 feet, 60 feet, 90 feet down. And they may be even growing on the side of a rock wall. Now, think about that just for a second. You've got a vertical wall with a coral growing off the side of it, and the sun is a fixed point of light, and the Earth is spinning at 26,000 miles an hour. So even with daylight, how long is that coral sticking on the side of a wall of rock getting sunlight? Is it getting 15 hours of light? Is it getting 8 hours of light? Is it getting 4 hours of light? it depends which way that rock wall is facing to determine if it's getting morning sun or afternoon sun. So there's going to be a period of the day when the sun is high noon, and that's where the corals are getting the most light they possibly can for a mere matter of maybe a couple of hours. And then it's already, the earth is turning and the sun is shining on it in a less intense way as it moves further and further away. So I hope that kind of makes sense to you. I know this stuff gets debated, and I get it, but I try to be reasonable in these plans and not say, well, I can see the sun rose at 6:30 this morning. I see the sun set at 9:38 p.m. because that's what my phone says. That's not true light. That's not the blasting light. Think about the time of day when the sun is up at the apex, when it's the hottest part of your day, and you're thinking, I absolutely do not want to mow my yard right now. You want to mow when the sun is way closer to the horizon, when it's a lot cooler outside. That's the best way I can illustrate it with an analogy. Amanda says, I run an Inkbird on my Phoenix heater. Some people or someone told me that only heaters without controllers should be used with an Inkbird. Is this true? I'm scared of the heater failing and roasting my tank. Okay, so here's what you're going to do, Amanda. You're going to take your heater and you're going to submerge it in the water, and on the end of it there's a knob, and that's the temperature control of the heater itself. Your Inkbird, now you don't even use the Inkbird at this point of what we're doing. So we're just going to put it in the water, plug it into the wall, and you're going to turn the knob on the top of the heater with one hand while you've got your fist wrapped around the heater itself, and you're going to turn it until you see the light come on the heater, and you'll start to feel the warmth in your hand. The heater won't burn you underwater, so don't fear that. And then you're going to turn the knob on the heater the other direction until the light turns off. You're going to turn it on and off and on and off and on and off, back and forth like this until you can find the exact sweet spot where the light is about to come on. That is now basically you have manually calibrated the heater to your current tank's temperature. Now, if you were to plug that heater, so let's just say that now your tank measures 77 degrees, whether you're using the Inkbird to measure it or you're using a glass thermometer, and so you kind of know that the heater is off. And you know if the tank gets any cooler, that heater's going to come on instantly, right? And if the water gets any warmer, the heater won't come on because the light is off. You know it's off. So now that we've got that manually calibrated, you can plug it into your Inkbird and you can tell it, if my tank gets to 76 degrees, turn on the heater. And if the tank gets to 78 degrees, turn off the heater. And that way you've controlled the heater and you know that it can't cook your system. Now, why doesn't the heater have the ability to cook your system anyway, even if the Inkbird were to make a mistake of some kind? Because you did that thing I was telling you where you turned it back and forth to find that sweet spot in the water. If you were just believing the numbers on the top of the heater and you point the little arrow to point at 77 degrees, that thing could be way off. I never believe the numbers on the end of the heater. I do that trick of twisting the knob back and forth to find the sweet spot. I hope that helps you, and I hope that kind of makes sense, and maybe as you're doing it, it'll clear up for you. But the Inkbird is a great secondary controller to verify that your heater cannot overheat your tank. It should kill the power to the heater entirely so that it doesn't have the ability to do anything because it's got no juice. Lee says, all the videos regarding microbubble scrubbing is from a few years ago. Is this something people still do, or was it just a fad? It was kind of a crazy time, and there's a lot of people with science that felt that it was pointless, and there's a few people that still totally believe in it. There are some benefits to doing it, I guess, but I chose never to do it. So I just don't see the benefit personally. I had a friend many, many years ago before microbubbling was even a thing. His name was Joseph Weatherson. I think he was out of Washington, like Seattle, Washington area. He had a beautiful reef, and every night he had air pumps connected to his closed loop pumps that would come on for about an hour to pump a bajillion bubbles into his reef. And the reason he did that was he felt like the bubbles would help the corals release the slime on their skeletons, on their tissue, so that they could breathe better, so to speak. and he liked doing it for that purpose alone. And we were all like, "What are you talking about?" But we couldn't argue with his results. His tank was phenomenal. It was tank of the month. It was in reefkeeping.com if you want to look it up. Again, the name you're looking for is Weatherson. And he had, I think it was a 240-gallon reef, and he had the most phenomenal fish room ever. All of us just drooled over his system. We loved his tank, and we loved his updates. But he was probably the first person I knew that was doing that. And then, like you said, a few years ago, there was a push for microbubbling and a swearing of that it would remove dinoflagellates from the tank, but it had to be done a very specific way with a very specific recipe that you would have to learn more about. And I don't even know if I'd call it a fad. I just think people were desperate and they were willing to try something out. And there was Cruz Arias was really pushing for it and thought that everyone should be doing it. And some people adhere to it and some people like it. And a lot of people felt like it was misleading. So that's kind of my take on that whole scenario. Russell says, what's the best type of clownfish to live in a carpet anemone? And I would say probably the Clarkie. I think that one, it's kind of a bulldog clownfish, but it seems to do really well in there. There may be another one, like, I think maybe, but I'm not positive. So I'd rather not say and give you the wrong answer. You could definitely look up clownfish compatibility or carpet anemones and Google that, and you'll get your specific answer you're looking for. But I think there's another one that can live in there as well. John says, I heard marine pure blocks are bad for the reef tank because they release heavy metals like aluminum. Should I take the blocks out? If so, what can I replace it with? I think what you should do is send in an ICP sample and see what your water is to know how you're doing when it comes to, like you said, aluminum. And then I would also look at your reef and see how your corals are doing. If the tank is doing well, then you don't need to remove anything. If you see that things aren't going well and you thought, well, I really think I should remove this, and maybe I'll see an improvement, then you should do that. I hope that makes sense. Mike Van Son says, I'm planning on building a Fowler tank, which is angels and butterfly fish, and an SPS tank, all pumping into one large sump. Any thoughts on this that I need to take into account? Yes, a fish-only system tied into the sump of a reef system probably won't work out long-term because a Fowler system is fish with live rock. That's what it means. That's what the acronym stands for. And I'm telling that to others, not you. The problem is that fish-only systems oftentimes have high nitrate and high phosphate. So as that drains into your SPS sump with your nice pristine water for your SPS corals, you aren't removing the phosphate nitrate nearly fast enough. And so it probably won't work out. I think you should have your SPS system with its SPS sump. I think you should have your fish-only system with its own sump. And that way you can control the scenario and you won't have to worry about the water quality in the fish-only system nearly as much, but you definitely want the SPS reef to have really nice water. Rick says, what do you think of the coral name game? I think the names are fun, and the renaming makes it hard for research and success. Yes, the names kind of help when you're trying to find another of that one. For example, if you were looking for Oompa Loompa zoanthids and you asked people or you Googled it, you'd find a website that sells them. That part's helpful. But like you said, if there's one that has a different name but appears to be the exact same thing, like for example, green slimer, that's a type of acropora that's had that name for, 18 years. And then someone else comes out with green slimer. It'd be very confusing if they weren't the exact same thing. Matter of fact, one of the corals in my tank I purchased was a green slimer. Turns out it was a lime in the sky, and they don't look the same, and they don't slime the same, and I have no idea why I was told it was a green slimer. So that part makes it a problem. But, a lot of the nicknames have just made the corals cost more for us as hobbyists, which isn't, a good thing for us. We like to, get pretty things for our tanks, and I bought an acan that's still alive called a King's Ransom, and just the name alone told me this thing was going to cost me a fortune. Diesel says, how do you feel about biopellet reactors, and do you still use yours? I feel fine about them, and I don't use one because I was trying different products out to see how they would work in removing nitrate. Jake says, thoughts on plumbing an RODI to an auto top-off reservoir container and let the ATK refill the sump as usual, or plumb the RODI system directly to the sump. You want to do the former. That's exactly how mine is set up. I have an RODI that is plumbed into my ATO container. I have a reservoir that has room for 43 gallons of water, and there's a float valve in there. When the float valve is to the top, it shuts off my RODI system, sorta, and then I twist a ball valve, and then my RODI system is completely off until I open that valve again. And that is how I've been doing my Reef now for the last 10 years. The ATK V2 is in that reservoir, and it pumps the water into the sump as needed, and my reservoir gets lower and lower. I was gone for a few days, and a lot of my water in the reservoir was empty yesterday. It was half empty, and I turned on the RODI system last night, and when the thing was full, I went and shut off the RODI system, and now I've got a week's worth of water again for my top-off. I also have a top-off container under my frag system. It has a float valve as well, and it does the exact same thing. Matter of fact, somehow, magically, I got completely lucky on this one. The two different top-off reservoirs are completely different sizes. One holds the 43 gallons, and one probably holds, I don't know, 7. I don't even know. It's been so long. I built it 3 years ago. But let's just say it holds 7 gallons of water as a ballpark idea. And they both have float valves. And when I turn on the RO system, both of them refill to the top. And once they're both full, it shuts off the RO. And somehow, like I said, I got really lucky. Both of these tanks that evaporate different amounts of water utilize the amount of water correctly. So basically, I've never had one run out of water when the other one didn't. They work in tandem. It's the weirdest thing. And so they're equally, I guess it's better to use percentages rather than water, rather than gallons. I could say they're both at 30% full when it's time to refill. It's, like I said, I got super lucky in that one. I didn't plan it that way. I just thought, this will fit. I'm going to build this. And it actually, I remember when it started happening in the beginning, I was like, wow, this worked out perfectly. And I didn't even, think it through that way. Glenn says, if you keep the white lights running during the day, but not at full percentage, can you keep the blues on for a longer duration and at a higher percentage without causing too much stress on the corals? That is quite the way to work the system there, Glenn. I would say, well, you know that the white light has a greater par. That's just a known fact. And so running it at less percentage, all you're doing is weakening the ability for the corals to grow because they thrive on that white light. They can grow really well under it. So reducing it, I feel like you're trying to reduce the white light to avoid growing algae, basically. I would just have the white lights at the proper intensity is what I would do. And then your blue lights, you're going to have your blue lights on. Blue lights grow coral much slower. They definitely give you more of a rich color to look at. But I wouldn't turn up the intensity of the blue to overcome the weakness of the white lights earlier in the day. I would just run the right intensity both times a day is what I would do. And that's really what I do in my own tank. G. Sanders says, I like the new look of the tank. Well, I'm glad you're happy. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just like, I'm kind of annoyed that I lost some stuff. Elmer asks how Spock is doing. She's doing okay. Let's see. Will the real Mark please stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up. Mike says, thank you for the super chat. And he says, thanks for all your help every week, week after week after week. I appreciate you keep tuning in. I'm hoping the things I talk about are beneficial to you. Vivek says, have you ever experienced any of your corals kicked back when the entire colony was almost dead and 1% kicks back and the entire colony is back alive in 3 to 4 months? So you're saying that everything went to crap to where like a few polyps survived and then the entire colony comes back? I don't know. I've never had that. I've had it where I would lose a lot of a colony and get down to what I call SPS DNA. and I'm looking at 3 or 4 little tiny polyps on the edge of a little bit of life, just a crumb of life. And then given time and good water parameters, it can grow into a whole new colony. But I've never seen it. I guess I don't know what type of coral you're talking about. Like I'm trying to imagine what coral could look like crap and yet all come back. And I'm thinking, well, green star polyps could close down and be shut down and look like death warmed over and then reopen completely. I suppose that's one, but I don't know what other corals would do something like you're describing. I do know there was a guy down in Houston. He had a reef tank that was in his garage, and his garage would get really hot. And every summer, all the corals in his tank would turn brown because the tank was so overheated. And then every winter, it would get all its beautiful color back. And I just thought that is the weirdest way to run a tank. I mean, his reef was gorgeous in the winter, but I would be so upset looking at everything just look like garbage during the summer months because it's getting baked. And I did actually have my reef tank in my garage when you think about it, because the room behind it was part of my garage. But I built a wall behind my tank and I put a window unit in there to cool the room initially. And then later I built this 400-gallon reef and I made the room even bigger. And I initially had a roll-around air conditioner that time. And then last year I actually had a duct put in from my AC system to pump cool air into the fish room. And I was able to remove the roll-around AC. And now I just have a nice climate-controlled room behind the aquarium. Now, that room does get warmer than the rest of the house because of the heat of the lights from the metal halides all day. But it feels nicer now because I'm pumping in some cool air while the AC is running. But it will never be the same temperature as the rest of my house because that room has a lot of humidity, it has a lot of water, and so it's, I don't have a thermometer in that room to tell me the room temperature, and I don't have the thermostat trying to make it be 77 degrees in that room at all times or something like that. It's just now I have cool air pumping in, which is nice. It helps. And it's nice when I'm working on the tank because I can feel the cool air hitting me, which I like. Devin says, is it better to keep a tight temperature, or would it be better to have a big swing to toughen those corals up? Let's not toughen them up, Devin. Let's just go ahead and keep things tight. And by the way, guys, when it comes to tank temperature, like JL is saying here, my temp has a 2-degree swing this summer. My tank typically runs 77 to 79 throughout the winter months. And then during the summer months, it tends to be 78 to 80. So there is a change based on those two extreme seasons. And that is something you could actually be used to. So don't sweat things. If you're like, well, I really like my tank at this temperature all the time. If for months your tank runs a degree hotter, and then as you head into the winter season, it's a degree less, that's okay. That's not something you have to worry about. Brian says, love your streams. Thanks for all you do. Are there any thoughts about the safety of having a long-nosed butterfly fish in a mixed reef? Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I know some people do it, but the long-nosed butterfly fish will eat some of the things you probably want to put in your reef. They will eat feather dusters, whether they're little hitchhikers or the beautiful Hawaiian ones. It'll go right after them, and other worms. So there may be other things that it would go after, possibly acans, blastos. Trying to think of other. It could even go at fungias or scolies. That fish is not considered reef safe. So keep that one in mind. Thank you very much for the super chat and the support, Macy's Daddy. I do appreciate it. Oh, that was the end of our video. Okay, let me come back to you guys. So it's me again. And I'm still doing questions. How are we doing on time? 45. Oh, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to do this really quick. One of the persons asked, what could they put in their carpet anemone? And sour Skittles reminded me, saddleback. That's one that goes in there. That's a good one. And another person said, the saddleback clownfish was really good in my anemone. However, it got really smart and figured out how to chase other fish into the anemone. So it brought food to its home. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. Wow, that's crazy. All right, let's see. Here's one with a lot of stuff. Give me a second to read it. Oh, okay, let's talk about it. Regis says, hi from Panama. I have a 10-gallon tank and I'm worried about my magnesium level that's 1780 ppm. I do 10% water changes every 2 weeks. Calcium's 380, nitrate's 5, phosphate is 0. I have some green hair algae. The alkalinity is 11.4. Phosphate is 7.9 to 8.2. Okay, all your numbers are great except for magnesium. So the only way you're going to get magnesium to come down on that tank, two things actually. The first thing is you need to measure your new salt water and see what the magnesium level is of that. Because if it's really high in every batch of salt water, the number's never going to come down. But if it's normal, like 1280, 1300, then as you do water changes, you'll bring it down. Now your tank is a 10-gallon tank, so technically this is a really easy one-time thing, or 2 times. I would do 2 5-gallon water changes and then measure, and odds are your magnesium will be down where it belongs again. There's another possibility that your magnesium test kit is just faulty. It's bad, it needs to be replaced. Maybe take a water sample to your fish store and have them measure magnesium, just double check and verify. Or you could do a ICP test and mail it in and wait a few days for the results and see what they say your magnesium is. But if it's really that high, it's going to be really hard on your snails because what it does is it causes the muscles in their foot to atrophy and they can't move. And then they starve to death and they die and they add to the water problems in your tank. So I would say make sure the test kit is right, verify the number with some other source, like I said, the fish store, an ICP test, and if it really is that high, measure your salt water, and if it's that high, you've got to change salt brands to something different. And then just do a couple of big water changes, which, like I said, 2 5-gallon buckets would solve this problem really quickly in a matter of a few days. Jamie Burgess says, I have small starfish, not sure what they are, but I found a bigger one in my Pasillipora that stared. Is there a type of pest starfish that is known to eat coral? Some people accuse Asterinas of eating corals. And so if you have the little tiny starfish, the little white or beige ones, sometimes they look a little greenish. It kind of depends what lighting you're looking at under your tank too. If you take them into the kitchen, look under normal lights, you can see what color it actually is. There are some that could be aggressive toward some SPS corals, but that being said, my tank is filled with Asterinas. Actually, all my tanks are, and I don't have any surprises going on. I even saw some on the Shadowcaster that I told you was getting chewed on by the fish, and I think they're just helping clean up too, but they're definitely not getting the entire colony. They are focusing on the area that was in distress. So I think that you should be able to, if you see a problem, if you see a constant problem, you can pluck them off and you can remove them and throw them away. But it's not like all Asterinas are bad. And yet online, a lot of people are thinking, oh, if you see one, you must remove it immediately. That's not true. I mean, they're just, because there's a few bad apples, let's destroy them all. And I know that sounds a little political, and I'm not trying to go there, but yes, if there is a problem, if there is a problem child, we want to solve the problem and remove it. But that doesn't mean every single Asterina starfish you find in your tank is going to be a problem. Pet Malu says, do you need to cycle a quarantine tank like you would a reef tank? I used Dr. Tim's with dry rock and added shrimp when I cycled my reef tank and waited several months. No, you don't have to do that. With a quarantine tank, the easiest situation is to take some kind of sponge material and throw it in your sump of your existing reef and let it propagate propagate with bacteria so that you can put that sponge in your quarantine tank to seed the quarantine tank with some beneficial bacteria. Normally, you can set up the tank. The quarantine is usually small. It has a hang-on-back filter. You put that sponge in there. You have the hang-on-back filter for filtration purposes, and you can put your fish in there relatively within, I'd say within a week or so, it'd be ready. I know that I should be more specific, and maybe I should go read Humblefish's article on quarantine tanks to refresh my brain on that one, because I'm a guy who hasn't had a quarantine tank in a long time. But I definitely know you don't need to cycle a quarantine tank for several months. Absolutely not. I think you could handle setting it up relatively rapidly. So I think a week is a smart approach. You get that sponge from the sump, you put it in the quarantine tank, you wait a week, and now you can introduce whatever you want to put. And then the rule of thumb with quarantine tanks to keep them from going south is to change 10% of the water every single day. So if it's a 10-gallon quarantine tank, you're going to change a gallon a day. A 10% water change every single day is essentially, I know it's not exact, but it's basically 70% water change a week. And your ammonia level just can't rise because you're staying on top of it with those water changes. Alex says, what species of fish would you like to see bred? A big fish and a smaller fish. I'm currently working with a lot of rarer to expert fish. Oh, wow, that's cool. I'd love to see someone breed the peppermint angelfish. That would be an exotic one to do. Oh, that'd be so awesome. There are some fish out there. When you talk about bigger fish, biota is doing little tiny ones. But I'm trying to remember the name of the other company. My friend Matt Wittenrich is running a different company. I'm drawing a blank right now. And he is making the big angelfish, like the Genicanthus. What is the one I like so much? It comes from the Solomon Islands. And it is a... man, I can see the fish with my eyes, but I can't see the name. Anyway, he makes them. And he's even done some hybrids with two different type of species getting together, which is really weird and kind of neat. He does blue stripe angelfish, and can't think of the one I like the most, but I want one. But I think it's like $5,000, so hence I don't have one. But I mean, there's so many cool things out there. Matter of fact, Coral Magazine every January issue, they have a list of all the fish that have been successfully bred, Alex. And I would recommend you, if you can, you could look it up online, maybe on their website, Coral Magazine, and see if you can see on the list anything that interests you that you'd like to try out, or maybe you could see things that have never been done before. You're like, aha, no one's done this one. I want to work on that. That would be kind of cool. Good luck with your project. Marcus, I think there's a typo in there. I'm not sure what you're asking. It's some type of glue stick that you're using for frags. I don't know. I just can't believe that's the name, Glue Master Stick, so I can't help you. Maybe a glue mastic? I don't know. Sam Harper says, when my tank crashed, my GSP, which is the Green Star polyps, closed for 2 months. And no matter what the parameters were post-crash, when they finally opened up, the polyps were really, really short. But a few months later, they're fine and normal. Yeah, some soft corals can really hunker down and shut down for indefinitely, and then later on come back. I don't know. I'm not trying to. I wasn't thinking of soft corals. I mean, that's like, the leather coral can close down for a week or so and pull all its polyps in, and it sheds and it's shut down, and then the whole thing opens up and it's beautiful again after it's done with that process. I guess I was thinking of other types of corals. My brain was really pointing toward SPS corals where they're closed down. Usually LPS, when they close down long term, they're gone. They don't come back. So, but I think some soft corals were possible ones that could come back and look pretty amazing later on, like you were saying in your case. Tim says, now that I'm starting to run metal halides, 3 times 150 watt bulbs, along with my other lights, my display gets between 79 and 80 degrees, and the sump is 81.5. That's interesting. What's the danger zone in your opinion? You're actually in a perfectly good zone. If your tank gets up to 85, that's a major issue. If it's 84, I'd be nervous. If it was 83, I'd be happier. I like where you're at right now. If you can keep your tank somewhere between 79 and 81, that's pretty decent right there and should be okay. Just stay on top of it. Don't let it get away from you. I'm not sure why your sump temperature is warmer than your tank. That's kind of weird. How are you measuring the two areas? Could you swap those probes and see if the same thing happens again? That would be a good way to know. Mike, I'm glad to hear you're freezing water bottles. That's a good plan while you're swapping. Man, you're picking August to switch out AC units. That means all day. Well, actually, it's going to be longer. It takes them all day to do it. And then your house gets all that heat, and it takes a while to soak the heat out of the walls of your home. It could take like a day to feel back to normal. That's a rough one. I've lived through it. I didn't like it. Earlier this year, I had all the ducts replaced in my house. They ripped out everything and put all brand new ones. Other than one, they're working great. I have one that goes all the way to my utility room and barely any air comes out, but it's in such a difficult spot that I didn't have the heart to make the guy try to crawl through there and resolve it. I just was like, all right. But I'd rather cool air blew out in that spot too. Scott says, how are you doing? Tank looks good as always. Mine is doing okay. The pest and enemies are doing my head in, but I'm still fighting them. Well, good luck in your battle, and thank you very much. I'm doing all right. I'm just really, really tired from my trip. Tim says, what do you think is a good, slightly elevated magnesium level if you plan to have lots of Montipora? 1400 is my recommended level. I love that. Montipora soak up magnesium, and 1400 ppm gives them a nice, rich color. And I am loving the colors I'm seeing in my tank right now. I mean, what you're looking at behind me looks like garbage because the webcam can't do it even remote justice. To the naked eye, this tank doesn't look anything like what you're seeing on your screen right now. It actually looks very pretty. It's all 20K lighting with the Reef Bright XHOs running as well, but it doesn't like that crazy, weird nocturnal blue like you'd think in a disco effect. It basically looks like late afternoon. It's really pretty. And I just wish, that's why I show you guys videos of the tank instead, because I just felt like what you're seeing is just not realistic. It looks like I put a bunch of fake stuff in water and I just have water moving. It's terrible. Oh, someone mentioned evaporative cooling. I didn't want to miss that. Where was that? Here it is. Reef Freak says, I use evaporative cooling on my XL 525. It's very efficient, it works quickly, but it also goes through a lot of RO water. So unless you have a large reservoir, you may have to fill it often. Yeah, that's 100% true. I used to use, I've always used evaporative cooling on all of my tanks. The frag system doesn't need it. It doesn't have any fans on it. It doesn't have any temperature problems. It just seems to, matter of fact, I kind of ignore it. Let me see what it is right now. Because like I said, I ignore it. Because it's never a problem, so that's why I ignore it. So my temperature of the frag system tends to be, it's loading now. For the past week, the average is 77.6 degrees. The minimum was 77, the maximum was 78.4. So that tank just hums along at that same temperature year round, and there's no surprises. And so the evaporation's very little on that one. On the tank behind me, I have 3 fans that blow down on the water when the tank gets too warm, and that has worked out really well. And I don't even care how much it needs in RO water because I have a giant reservoir. But even if it was using fans for a long period every single day, my reservoir really has about 11 days worth of water in it. So if it was like worst case scenario, it's just blowing fans 24/7, I probably would get a week out of that reservoir before I had to refill it. I guess it's more of a problem for someone that has to pour in the water manually. Like, God, I'm doing this all the time. That would be more frustrating. And in that scenario, I would have a bigger reservoir. So I would find a spot for it, and or I can build you one and make you a nice, pretty reservoir to put next to your tank that you don't mind looking at because it's so pretty that and it's easier to fill up than something under the stand that's in a tight enclosed area where it's so limiting in space. Green Navy says, is a trigger system 36-inch sump big enough for an SCA aquarium? Well, how big is the SCA aquarium? Smoke and Reefer says, do you have any ideas what caused the problem in your tank yet? I really don't. I have a few guesses, but they're the same ones I talked about a week ago or whenever it is I did that stream where I talked about what I did and how I handled it. Those theories are just theories. I may never know what actually caused it. And I can't really control that situation. All I can do is just be glad it's done and it's resolved. Because it came out of left field, I don't feel like, oh, it's something I have to worry about happening again. It's not like, well, what were those conditions so I can prevent it from ever happening again? Because technically, that scenario has pretty much never happened to me before. So it was just kind of a weird scenario. It could have been cumulative of several problems going on with the tank. Like I said, it could have just been the tipping point. Like the nitrates finally hit 1 ppm too much in my tank, and that coral's like, that's it, I'm out of here. Could have been that. Or it could have been, 4 other things. So, or it could have been a combination of two or three things that happened that caused it. I want to take a second to show you guys a picture I stole from the internet that caught my eye. It was in the Neptune group, and I want to show it to you. So I'm going to throw it on the screen here. I'm going to let you guys look at this. And just take a second to absorb what you're looking at. Now, in the upper right and upper left corners, you see 4 dose pumps. Those are dosing heads. There's a total of 8 heads. Underneath, there are a total of 8 different cylinders of liquids being pumped in for whatever reason, whatever this guy's using. What caught my eye, and then dead center is the thing that has like that logo that kind of looks like an N, is the Neptune Apex. Now the thing in the bottom that's orange, that's round, that's what caught my eye. All the rest I didn't care about. But that orange thing in the middle, I was like, what is that? Let's see, can I zoom in on this? No, I can't. Oh, I can only do that. Anyway, that right there, this thing is a wine chiller that apparently you can purchase at Home Depot, and it's black. He repainted to be orange so it would match his Neptune system theming. He even painted the wheels on his cart, on his cabinet here. But he is using that to chill the Red Sea AB solution, because apparently you can only have like a week's worth at a time, and then the rest of the time you have to keep it cold. And so he can actually hit the buttons on here and chill the food, and then dose it with one of these dosing heads to feed into his tank. And I was like, I am in love with this idea. It is so smart. So for example, if I was wanting to do something similar like this with my tank, I would get that thing in the bottom, that wine chiller, and I would take some kind of a bottle, like maybe a Voss bottle or whatever that thing is that fits, and fill it up with Reef Nutrition Arctopods, and then set up a dosing pump to trickle those guys in during the daytime into the reef as snacks for Antheus to eat. And I was like, I am so impressed with this idea, and I want to show it to you guys because I just thought you'd love it as well. So let me know what your thoughts are, if you thought that was cool or not. Russell says, what would you suggest for a beginner SPS coral? My 75-gallon reef has been running for 10 months with LPS and softies, and I think I'm ready to expand the reef. Thanks, Mark. I think you could start with Montipora. You could start with Pasillipora. If you want, you could try an Acropora. But what I'd suggest you do is find something affordable rather than something high-end. Avoid the nickname thing that just, oh my God, have you seen this coral? It's incredible. Because reality is, a lot of the incredible corals look like that because they're very young and they're bursting with energy and they are incredible looking and they're photographed really well. And instead, I would go to the fish store and I would look and I'd find some bird's nest, I'd find Pasillipora, I would find Montipora. Montipora can be the scrolling kind, or it can be the kind that are fingers called digitata, digits. And those kinds are easy beginner SPS corals you can try out and see how they do. They come in lots of different colors, so you can actually have a lot of fun with this. And since you've already had LPS corals, what else did you have in here? And you have some softies, you can expand. Now, in your softies category, if you have Sinularia, you need to remove that from your tank because Acropora do not like Sinularia, and Sinularia do not like Acropora, and they cannot be in the same body of water. But anything else in your arsenal of soft corals is okay, including Nephthia. So, like I said, if you have Sinularia, which I think is called the finger coral, you should remove that one from the system. But you can have leathers with Acropora, you can have cold with Acropora, you can have Gorgonians with Acropora. You can have star balls with Acropora. I mean, all the softies are okay, but the one you cannot have is Sinularia. Tim says, would you ever try a blue throat trigger or a small Niger trigger in the reef? I've never had an interest in having triggers. I mean, I think they're kind of pretty in a weird shape, but I'd rather put 30 Antheus in my tank right now than a trigger. Benjamin, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, thanks for all you do to promote success in the hobby. Paul Biggs says, I can't find a Sherman Rose anemone in the UK. Are they available outside the States? That's a good question. I would think at some point one would have migrated over there, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're all over the U.S. I know that, and there's probably a few up in Canada as well. But getting one over there at this point, right now, would be really difficult with the way everything is with borders being closed. And I mean, there was a real big concern by PJAC, which is the legal organization that defends the hobby. It defends dogs, cats, fish. That organization actually wrote a letter to Congress a few months ago begging them do not close the importation of livestock because no one has ever gotten sick from fish and coral in the 50 years of this industry. And they didn't want them to prevent the importing of these animals, which would affect economically everyone in and outside of the U.S. You know, the sellers in other countries would lose the income. The sellers in the U.S. would lose the income. It would be a terrible, terrible blow to the industry. So fortunately, that hasn't happened. Tim says, since you love photography, why don't we have a contest or something for the most interesting and pretty reef photo? You know, I like those, and I've been participating in those in the past. I've organized some of them. I just kind of forget about them, but I do like that. I think we should do something like that in the group. We should try to get something started. Maybe I'll get Eric to spearhead that. He needs some extra work. Robert, I love you too. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. Miguel's Reef says, how would you resolve a bacterial bloom in a new tank without using a UV? Well, you're going to kind of have to wait it out, and it could take a couple of weeks. It could take as much as 3 weeks. You might be able to add some competing bacteria to devour bacteria in your tank, too. You can leave the lights off for a while. You didn't mention if well, you said new tank, so there's no livestock, right? You just have too much bacteria at the moment. It will kind of take care of itself. I mean, a lot of problems will take care of themselves in our reef tank if we ignore them long enough. But the question is, how much are you willing to tolerate? And also, how much are you willing to lose while this thing is burning itself out? So normally, we like to tackle it quickly. Like, for example, I could have said, you know what? This RTN event, I'm just going to let it kill everything. And then I'm going to remove all the death, and I'm going to have all this empty rock work, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of new corals I really want. That could be my attitude, but of course I would never do that. But I could see, I mean, that's an example of letting something burn its way out. Just let it kill whatever it's going to kill and see what survives and work from that. And I just don't operate that way. But in a new tank you're dealing with, just kill the lights for now and wait it out. You could do I wouldn't even do a water change. I would just let it consume whatever it's consuming because it's going to run out of whatever it's snacking on, and it's going to then collapse and it's going to vanish. Scott Morrison says, I still haven't seen you on Aaron's aquarium. You know, I was on his chat one time a while back, but that was about it. I've not done any kind of like interview stuff. And matter of fact, I haven't done any interview stuff on this channel yet because I've been waiting for this software to do it successfully so I can start bringing people in. And then we can have 2 microphones that don't work. It's just me being stubborn. Let's see. Jamie says, in the last week, I've seen a lot more life in my sump, which is great, but I also now have what looks like limpets. Are these okay? Will they become an issue? Limpets. No, I don't think they'll be a problem at all. They're probably doing well down there because there's no predators to consume them. Limpets are a fleshy type of snail. They're kind of pretty. I like them. And there's also Scotus, I think, or the other ones. And you can always transfer them up into the main tank where they belong. And just be glad you have let's call it an unlimited supply that comes from the sump to put into the tank. Oh yeah, Marcus suggested also you could use it for feeding phytoplankton using that wine chiller. I mean, wasn't that a cool idea? I was like, wow, that is so awesome. I really like that idea. Reef Freak, Devil's Hand isn't in the Sinularia family as far as I'm aware. My tank actually has a bunch of Devil's Hand in the back that I wish someone would take because it's eating up space. But no, Sinularia has a certain look, and it just looks like fingers. It used to be something pretty popular. It's like everyone started with Sinularia, and then they tried putting in SPS, and it wasn't working. And I think it was Eric Borneman that started teaching all of us, hey, you guys got to quit combining these two corals. Get the simulator out of your tank, and now you can put in the other stuff. Yeah, I think devil's hand is lobophytum also. I think that's correct. I don't know why it'd be called Sinularia, but anyway, there's a very certain one that you can't have, and it shouldn't be too hard to find what leather coral kills Acropora in Google. Like I said, I mean, Google is your friend, guys, and use it a lot. I use it constantly. I'm constantly typing stuff in Google and trying to figure things out of what's going on around us. All right, so I'm going to wrap up the stream here. We've been going for a couple of hours. Oh, we are right at 2 hours. I'm like 2 minutes short. Let's just end this thing right now. It is water test Saturday. You need to test your water. I'm about to go test mine because, like I said, I was gone a few days, and I want to know how things are going in the tank. I also want to get some rest, and then I think tomorrow I'm going to tackle my big sand bed vacuuming water change thing that I want to do on the tank, and then I'll be able to start working again starting on Monday and start getting those orders out to you guys. So real quick, I'll throw this on the screen. If you aren't a member of Club Milos Reef, we have 8,000 members. We talk to each other every single day. I like to read your comments, and it's the best way to tag me on Facebook so I can see what you're trying to show me. Or if you have a question, by tagging me, I can get in there and answer it. Or even one of the moderators might tag me in your thread in Club Milos Reef. So if you're not a member, please join. We have a great group. We're super nice. If you have questions, we're there to answer them. That's the whole reason I made the group, and we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary. And then also, I want to thank you guys when you shop at Milos Reef, because this is literally my business. This is what I do for a living. I sell aquarium supplies. I've been doing it for 10 years. My company has been growing. I'm hoping to expand next year to have employees, which would be awesome. I'm nervous at the same time, but I would love to see that happen. And when you guys are supporting my business, buying aquarium supplies, you're supporting me, and it allows me to continue to do these streams, of course, and to sit at my desk and answer your emails. And what else do I do for you? And build things. So I really do appreciate your support. You guys are awesome. And, I see it in the chats when we talk. It's a really nice, comfortable environment. We have moderators in this chat as well as on Club Milos Reef that keep the trolls out so that we can all get along and have a good time and not feel berated. And that's really important. So thank you for all of the times that you log in. And I apologize today for the, whatever that was, 15 minutes of silence. And, please stay on top of your tanks. Don't let things get away from you during this hot month. We don't want the tank to get too hot. We want to have good water parameters, and we want to have healthy, thriving fish. I'll see you guys in a week. Bye.